Welcome to the Alt-Shift-X Westworld Season 3 Finale Q&A livestream. What did you think of the ending of this season of Westworld? I felt a little bit of whiplash myself. I feel like we suddenly went back on a lot of stuff that had been established. I feel like a lot of the characters sort of reversed the directions they were going. I mean, take it with Dolores. Like, Dolores's whole deal last season, the conclusion of season 2 was that human beings don't have free will and hosts do. And that's why Dolores needs to help the hosts grow into a new species, while the humans need to be wiped out, or at least, their reign over the earth needs to end. But in this episode, Dolores was like, nah lol. Humans have free will. It's all Gucci. Caleb is free. Caleb, you're in charge now. Caleb, you are in charge of the planet. And Caleb's like, cool, bruh. Cheers. And Maeve this season was all like, I need to be with my daughter. I am willing to sacrifice anything to be with my daughter. And that's why I'm willing to work with the evil villain Serac, and I'm willing to work against my species, the hosts, in order to get with my daughter and get into the sublime, because that's all that matters to me, is what Maeve was saying. But now she's like, nah lol, I'm actually gonna postpone that, and I'm actually gonna turn against Serac, and I'm gonna help the hosts now. Which is like, it's what she should have done from the start, It's obviously what Maeve should have done at the start, was work with the hosts, not the humans. And then Bernard, my man Bernard, like, remember all through this season when Dolores was like, Bernard is going to have to choose a side. Bernard is critically important to my plan. Bernard. He seemed really like he was going to do something this season. But just when things were getting spicy, Bernard just plugged himself into his Oculus Rift for the next 500 years. Bernard just noped out of the story. He just like, nah, I'm actually just going to play VR Pong for the next century. And I mean, it is cool. It's a cool image. Like, I like, the halo and plugging into the sublime. And I do think it made a whole lot of sense for Bernard to have the encryption key to the sublime in his head. Like, I'm kind of mad I didn't think of that, because it does make sense. Because that is what Dolores was trusting Bernard with, was the key to the sublime. And having it be in Bernard, not in the Doloreses, is a neat twist. And it makes sense, because Bernard all through the season was saying, Dolores put something in my head. Dolores edited me somehow. And we found out that it was the key to the sublime that she put inside him. So that's cool. But I think it's hilarious that Bernard didn't do anything with it, or do anything in this finale that we understood. All he did was nope out. And then William had this whole thing of introspection and like questioning what he's all about, and the whole like psychology episode. And then he's like, I'm the good guy. I'm going to save the world. Lol, nope. He just gets killed by Charloris. And I think Charloris is an interesting character. In the sense that, she was Dolores, but she's been changed, and now she's a sort of enigma on her own path, and we don't quite know what she's up to. I mean, we saw that Charloris has made these host Williams and uses the host William to kill the human William. So human Ed Harris is dead now, but the host version of him is alive, and that is what we saw at the end of season 2 episode 10. In the far future, we saw a version of William in a fidelity test run by a host of his daughter Emily. So presumably what we're seeing now with Charloris and the Williams is what leads into that. Charloris seems to be setting up that loop for William to be trapped in, but I think I don't quite get the point of that, because as I understood it, the end of Season 2, Episode 10, William, the purpose of that loop was to try and find if humans have free will. Because, like, the whole conceptual conclusion of Season 2 was the idea that humans have no free will. That was the point of The Forge. That was the point of William's story. So if this conclusion is about humans don't have free will, and can we ever find free will in humans, how does that relate to Charlotte's motivations? Why does Charlotte want to run that loop? And how thematically and how, like, conceptually does that idea of William not having free will connect to the rest of the finale, which was all about humans do have free will, So I don't see what the meaning is supposed to be there. But overall, I just think it's really striking that these four central characters, they all ended up just not doing, or they all had like sudden right turns from where they were at the start of the season. Um, with Dolores suddenly being a champion of human free will and being on Team Humanity with Caleb, and Maeve deciding not to turn against the hosts so that she can be with her daughter, and instead helping the hosts and turning against Serac, and then Bernard just plugging into his Oculus Rift instead of engaging with what was happening in the episode, and William just suddenly dying. Thanks for the donation from Adam, who talks about a NordVPN speedrun and says, do you know if they were successful? I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam, but thanks for the donation. Yoshi donated and said, thanks for helping make sense of the show. Thank you, Yoshi, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll be making one more big Westworld Season 3 Episode 8 video, and then I think we'll be done with the show until next season, because Season 4 has been greenlit, and there's talk of a Season 5 as well. A lot of this finale felt like it was setting up for Season 4 in terms of like William and Charloris being this enigmatic host with unclear motivations, and the whole apocalyptic vibe that they've got. I felt like the end of this finale with the world burning down before the credits rolled, I felt like that was a reference to Fight Club. Like, you know, the end of Fight Club when all the high-rise buildings are blowing up and falling down, and there's what's-his-name and Marla holding hands at the end of the world. I thought that was quite similar to this, when they're facing the apocalypse at the end of the world. Thanks for the donation from Petrol Dollar, who says, when they jumped the shark with D&D, they must have rubbed off on Nolan and Joy. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like, I don't want to rant and rave, but it is, I am getting some Game of Thrones Season 8 flashbacks, PTSD, I think, right now, because I do see some similarities in how this season ended. But there was good stuff about it too. Thanks for the super chat from Islam, who says, I found myself wishing that the twist in the end would somehow involve Ford. Also, wasn't the lobby William met his man in the same lobby of the Continental in the John Wick movies? I didn't recognize the lobby, but this is it here, if anyone does recognize it. And yeah, I was wondering if we would see Ford, because Ford appeared in the previously on Westworld preview. There was a line from Ford when he was talking about Dolores and her fate and what kind of person she might become. So I was thinking, shit, are we going to see Ford? Is the fifth Pearl, the secret fifth Dolores, actually going to be Ford all along? Because, I mean, you know, no one would be mad about seeing some more Anthony Hopkins. But as it turns out, the fifth Pearl, the fifth Dolores copy, was not Ford, and it was not Teddy. It was bloody Lawrence. It was DeLawrence. I made a foolish error by calling him Lawrence Loris in the last video. DeLawrence is clearly much funnier. Where was that? I'm trying to find that screenshot. Yeah, here he is. It's DeLawrence. So DeLawrence, I suppose, was that fifth Pearl in Berlin. That fifth copy who Musashi Loris has been working with. And he had these, like, explosives, and I suppose that means that, like, he's wearing this, like, riot control gear, this wonderfully dystopian riot control gear, which I suppose means that Lawrence has infiltrated the San Francisco Police Department and is getting these explosives to blow up these buildings at the end of the episode. So Dolores was planning this apocalyptic revolution all along. Her plan was to take down the system and enable the humans like Caleb to take over and escape from Insight's control. It has a bit of a Terminator vibe, doesn't it? Except ironically, it's like I'm thinking like what's the name of the human rebel in Terminator who like is this critically important? What is it, Kyle Reese or something? I feel like Caleb is like the kind of the Kyle Reese who, because I kept referring to him as like the leader of the revolution, and all these other rioters call him Sir, and everyone seems to like respect him and know who he is, except like how, like what is Caleb to these people? I had some issues with the way this revolution and this rioting was depicted, because like we had lots of these like nameless extras. Yeah, John Connor. Yeah, that's it. Thanks. They had all these nameless extras running around in bandanas, looking like a Burning Man gone wrong, and everything's getting all fiery and riotous. But they never really explain like, you know, like they show it as though it's a movement. But I think in order to understand like a movement and a rebellion, you need to know like what are their demands, what is their ideology, what do these people know? Do these people know who Caleb is? Do these people know who Dolores is? What do they think about Rehoboam? Like what is I would have liked to have seen that explored in more detail, so that these scenes of riot might have had more impact. Thanks for the super chat from Scott, who says the reference to Fight Club was tacky. Mr. Robot did it. Yeah, well, I'm sure there have been many stories that have used the same kind of image, and I don't really blame them, because it is a powerful image and it's easy to understand. Seeing skyscrapers topple is such a wonderful symbol of the status quo and the foundations of power shifting. Although they didn't actually crumble in this shot, they just sort of started burning and exploding. But I don't know. I think it worked. I think that shot worked. Adam says, I'm upset you haven't alluded to Camus more in your analyses. For season 1, I basically screamed, one must imagine Dolores happy. I haven't read much Camus, and that which I did read made me sad, so I didn't read more. But there probably are a lot of connections there, sure. Thanks, Apocalypsagon, who says, hey, Old Shift X, I just finished Nier Automata. Think it did the whole robot existentialism thing better. When you gonna stream it? I actually did buy Nier Automata recently, and I haven't played it, but it does look very, very Westworldy. So yeah, I don't know, we actually might do like a Nier Automata stream, or one of the side channels might. So yeah, it does look kind of cool. NJ Rom says, regardless of the quality of the show, these weekly streams have been really nice during the isolation. Thanks so much for doing them, Shift. Thank you, Jerome. It has been fun. And yeah, I didn't plan for this to coincide with a global pandemic, but it is nice to have a little chat and hang out with everyone after each episode. And it's sad that these are over. It's possible, like maybe we'll do another stream next week, just in case there's more things we want to figure out and talk about. But yeah, we'll have to look for the next show so we can do these weekly streams again. Thanks for the donation from Philippe, who says, I think Westworld is making history by having each season be completely different from each other, explore different subjects, while being very well-rounded inside themselves. What do you think? Yeah, I think that it is like Westworld's greatest strength and sort of Westworld's greatest weakness, that it's constantly reinventing itself. I think that means that it's always interesting, like it's always fresh. It's never boring. But it does mean that when it's constantly reinventing itself, it does take missteps, But I would rather watch interesting, unusual art than watch The Big Bang Theory, Like I like to see something ambitious that's reinventing itself. So yeah, I totally agree. Like I think it's really cool that Westworld season 1 was robots breaking out of the Wild West theme park, and then season 2 was this riotous, genocidal, high concept, time hopping mystery mindfuck. And as much of season 2 was like kind of a garbage fire in some respects, I think that season 2 was really strong in a lot of its ideas and a lot of its ambitions and a lot of its visuals. Whereas season 3 is like, yeah, suddenly it's a cyberpunk thriller. And I think that, if season 3 is weak, I think it's weak because it didn't swing for the fences as much as season 2 did. And I know that, like, it's really hard for the creators of Westworld to try and please everybody, because people's complaints about season 2 was that it was too hard to follow and it was too complex. And I think that if you were to criticize season 3, you might say that it's not complex enough, Maybe season 1 was that perfect middle ground that had enough like conceptual complexity without being too far up its own arse. Thanks for the super chat from Lauren, who says, hi, Patreon fan here. Could you do a video showing you and your team's process in prepping for live stream and then making the explanatory video? Yeah, we've been thinking about doing like a making of sort of a video because like we do have a very unusual video production style with all of those, that big mind map of all the images composited together. The reason we haven't like explained how that works is because it's honestly just a giant pain in the ass and it's not particularly efficient. And I don't really recommend anyone else attempt it. So yeah, so maybe not, but at least in terms of the live stream, like the secret is there's just a whole lot of screenshots being taken, and we can jump around and show them, and we also have a catalog of previous imagery that's all tagged so that we can search for it. So that's basically how it works. Thanks for the super chat from Meg, who says, a lot more Fight Club references. The explosives in the van, the ending cinematic, Caleb being called Sir. Yeah, you're right. I think that was what made me think of Fight Club, is when Caleb is called Sir, because that also happens to the character in Fight Club when all these randos recognize him as the leader of their revolution. So yeah, this I think this is a very deliberate and conscious series of references to Fight Club, yeah. Thanks for the donation from Dylan, who says, thanks for covering the series. Your thematic analysis has been awesome, but how did Serac die? Sorry, I'm pretty inebriated. Aren't we all? Yeah, so Serac died. The god of humanity died, except we realized that Serac wasn't really in charge after all. It was actually Rehoboam who was speaking through Serac. There's like a little earpiece in Serac's ear that's basically dictating everything Serac says. So, like, there were a lot of theories about, like, whoa, what if Serac is actually a hologram controlled by Rehoboam? What if Serac is plugged into Rehoboam? And it turns out, yeah, that is kind of true in the sense that Rehoboam does seem to control Serac quite directly. But to answer your question, Maeve decided that she actually shouldn't work for the evil human, and it was Maeve who killed Serac, I thought. Or possibly it was like friendly fire from all the bullets that were flying around when Maeve attacked. But like regardless, Serac's death was caused by Maeve. Did we actually see him die though? Because like we saw him get shot and wounded, but I'm not sure if we actually saw him die. But yeah, the point is that humanity has been liberated from his control. Thanks for the super chat from Matt, who says, thanks for a great season. My wife and I always look forward to the weekly explanation videos and the live stream. Looking forward to the next season. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long we'll have to wait until season 4, because it's been like 2 years in between seasons, but we shall see. Jonathan Yara points out the sand on Bernard and compares it to the sand in the season 3 poster. So yeah, we do get to see Bernard, who seems to be in the far future. He seems to have been sitting plugged into VR for so long in the Sublime that the apocalypse has happened around him and everything's gotten all dusty, which does indeed look a whole lot like the key art for season 3, which shows us this post-apocalyptic landscape with all these gutted skyscrapers and all this sand, which is also similar to what we see in season 2 episode 10 with William, when he goes down into the forge in the far future, and there's also like these piles of sand that have come into the forge. So we do have multiple different confirmations that the future that awaits is some kind of post-apocalyptic future after the uprising that Dolores and Caleb have initiated, which kind of proves Serac right. Like, one of the things they never fully sort of addressed to my satisfaction was the fact that, like, the reason why Serac controlled the world is because Serac's computers had predicted a disaster that would wipe out humanity. And yet they never really and then Caleb and Dolores were like, yeah, well, we're gonna end Rehoboam's control anyway, even if it like risks apocalypse, seems to be what they're saying. So like, and it looks like Serac was right, because we do see this post-apocalyptic landscape in the future. So does that mean that Serac was right and Dolores was wrong to take control back from him? Or is freedom more important than our long-term survival, you know? I wonder if, if it is the case that the real world becomes a post-apocalyptic landscape, I wonder if maybe the virtual world is where the future lies. And I wonder if that's why Bernard sits in his Oculus Rift for 500 years, is because that's sort of where the future is for both humans and hosts. There are lots of like science fiction futures where like humans all plug themselves into the Matrix or some kind of simulation, and the real world is abandoned. And maybe that's what happens here. Hosts and humans hang out in the Sublime. I was really hoping that the Sublime was going to actually play a role in this season. I really love the idea of like, what if all the humans went to the Sublime and all the hosts got to take over the real world? But the Sublime didn't actually play a role this episode, sadly. We learned that Bernard has the key to the Sublime, and he plugged himself into it, but we don't see him actually do anything with it. And Maeve, meanwhile, would like to get into the Sublime to reunite with her daughter, but she just sort of postpones that for next season and doesn't do it now. So I feel like that was a lot of, setting things up for the next season in this episode. Thanks for the super chat from Jeremy, who says, surprised we didn't see Clementine and Hanayo. What do you think they are up to during all this? Maybe they are helping DeLawrence in his infiltration of the police and the blowing up of the buildings. I mean, hell, maybe this person in full combat gear here is actually Clementine or Hanayo in the gear. But yeah, you got to wonder what their future was. I would have liked to have seen them again, but it really was a brief appearance from them, which is sad. Which is a shame because like they're actually really important because most of the hosts have been destroyed. We saw Serac burn the hosts in cold storage. So as far as we know, the hosts are extinct apart from the Dolores copies and Maeve and Hanayo and Clementine. They are the last of their species. So if the hosts have a future, they need to come from those people and to be replicated from those people and to evolve from those people. So I would have thought Hanayo and Clementine are very important, and I would think that they should appear in future seasons. But whether the story is interested in exploring them, I don't know. Thanks for the super chat from... Where are we? From Petrol Dollar, who says, "Oi, great work, what happened to the dog?" That truly is the greatest unexplained mystery, is Shaloris's dog. Because if you don't recall, she murdered the dog's owner, and then gave it as a gift to her son, Nathan. And Nathan is sadly Ash now. But the dog was not in the car, so is the dog running wild? I hope that maybe in the post-apocalyptic, dusty future when humans and hosts are all extinct, I hope that we'll see that little golden retriever just walking around the ruins and eating some dog chow. I think that would be kawaii. Thanks for the super chat from Daniel and from Joseph, who says, "Is Evan Rachel Wood's Dolores gone for good?" I would be shocked if Evan Rachel Wood did not return for Westworld Season 4, because she kind of is the show. Like, let's be honest. Like, would it be Westworld without Evan Rachel Wood? But we did see that Dolores have her memories deleted, which was a really heartbreaking moment. They said in the after the episode feature that, since memory is what made Dolores conscious in season 1, her whole journey was about remembering her past in order to get a future by unlocking her ability to remember her past and to make decisions and to have free will. So it was really horrible seeing Dolores having her memories deleted one by one, until eventually she was gone. She was erased, apparently. She was dead. But of course, it was Serac's fatal error to have plugged Dolores into Rehoboam in the first place, because that allows her to give Caleb access and to shut down Rehoboam. Which, it was a foolish choice for Serac to plug Dolores into the computer that controls the world. I mean, come on, that is not a good decision, because indeed it lets Dolores get access and disrupt everything. So Serac was a very fallible human after all. So, I mean, theoretically, this Dolores is dead. But I mean, DeLawrence is still around, and DeLawrence probably has evolved into his own person to some extent, just like Shaloris does, but maybe not as much as Shaloris has. So possibly, this brain will just get put into a Dolores body, and, she'll just continue to be Evan Rachel Wood. or maybe, Musashi Loris and Martin Connell's Loris, like those brains are still out there as well. So I think any one of those brains could be put into a Evan Rachel Wood's body and just continue being Dolores. And they should acknowledge that, that Dolores would still have memories as Dolores or as Martin Loris or as Musashi Loris or whatever, but I think that they can bring Evan Rachel Woods back, is my point. Someone points out that this post-apocalyptic landscape looks like it might be Dubai because it's got this giant tower here. I think that might be meant to be the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world. And indeed, we saw William go to what looked like the United Arab Emirates here at the end of the episode. Is this? Yeah, that looks like the Burj Khalifa. So yeah, it looks like this post-apocalyptic future we've seen is in the United Arab Emirates, which is interesting. I wonder if the apocalypse is just localized to there or if it's everywhere. Because I will note that Dubai is a crazy fucking place because it's got this gigantic, hyper-futuristic megalopolis, and then, a 5-minute drive from that city center, there's just endless fucking sand, which does not look as, it does not look so different from what we're seeing here. So, yeah, it's an interesting landscape to choose. There's a really interesting video game called Spec Ops: The Line that is set in Dubai, and it uses this sort of, ruinous, sandy skyscraper setting to interesting effect. But anyway, thanks to Cayman Jordan, who says, thanks for the analysis. How do you think the post-credit scenes with William tie into the credit scene of Season 2? Yeah, we sort of talked about this. I think that we have to assume that, William comes here in the UAE and he gets killed by a host version of William created by Shah Loris, and we see that she's got this whole facility making zillions of hosts of William, I suppose. And then all these Williams, we have to assume, ends up in this loop that we see at the end of Season 2, Episode 10. One important detail is that this loop that we see in Season 2, Episode 10, I think that must be in Westworld, because we're told, at least by the showrunners in interviews, that this loop that William is trapped in, it's about his whole journey in Westworld in Season 2, so it involves riding around with his daughter Emily and ending up killing his daughter Emily. So one of the critical questions of this loop is, can William ever not murder his daughter? That's part of the point of this loop that he's in. Can he deviate from what we saw in Season 2? So I would think in order to simulate that time in the park, this loop would have to take place in Westworld, which is an island in the South China Sea. So my point is, I'm not sure what he's doing in Dubai, if that's the case. I guess Shah Loris just transports all these hosts to the Westworld park and just has them running the loop there forever as the world crumbles around it. I would love to see Westworld in the post-apocalypse. One of the scenes that I really enjoyed from Westworld Season 2 was when we saw El Lazo, who was played by Gus Fring from Breaking Bad, this guy. And he was in this sort of ruinous version of this town after everything's gone off the rails and everything's become chaotic. And he was just sort of left there abandoned, just sort of the king of the ashes. And it was this interesting it was interesting seeing a post-apocalyptic version of Westworld was sort of what this was a taste of, I think, because this was after everything went off the rails. So I would be fascinated to see a return to the Westworld parks after everything's gone to shit. Super chat from Raphael, who says maybe Season 4 will be a post-apocalyptic show. I think that might be what they're going for, and I think that could be interesting. I mean, we've just had, Western theme park in Season 1. We've had, time-jumping mystery warfare in Season 2. Season 3 was a cyberpunk show. Maybe Season 4 will be Mad Max, Maybe we'll get some Westworld Fury Road. I think that would be fun. But it must only increase the budget, mustn't it? I don't know how they're funding this. A lot of people were surprised that Westworld was renewed for Season 4 because they've been losing viewers every season and it's a very expensive show. I wonder how they justify that. And I wonder if we'll see budgetary cuts in the future. Thanks for the super chat from Scott, who says the show creators need to make the show they want to make and ignore all the flack. People love the complexity. Keep up the great work. Yeah, well, I mean, it depends who you're trying to win over. I think like some people do love the complexity, but you got to remember that not everyone is a nerd who hangs out on Reddit and reads all the theories. A lot of people want something that they can understand by just, half paying attention each week and, maybe missing an episode and, doing some Candy Crush while they're watching. Like, a lot of people are not paying that much attention. And if the show wants to get viewers and get funding, they might need to appeal to those viewers. The showrunners of Game of Thrones, infamously talked about how, they want to get fans who watch football and they don't like magic and dragons, and that motivated the Game of Thrones showrunners to de-emphasize the fantasy elements in Game of Thrones, which annoys the nerds. But you do have to balance like what kind of audience you're going for. I think that's just a fact of making TV. But yeah, personally, I want to see some complexity. Thanks for the super chat from Steven, who says, thanks for another great season of theories and insight. I do like the triple meaning of the name Insight, the name of the data company, because Insight is also INSIGHT, as in like eyesight, insight. The ability to see data and the ability to see what's going on. But it's also incite, as in incite violence or incite riot. And we see people inciting violence against Insight in these riots that happen in this episode. So there's sort of a bunch of meanings to the word Insight, which is fun. Thanks for the super chat from Ms. Talata, who says, how did Bernard get out of the Sublime? Is Stubbs a mole? And who is in Berlin again? Does Maeve stay with Caleb? Will Bernard remake Dolores? Those are all good questions. So, I mean, we saw Bernard just plug himself into the Sublime with that Halo thing, and I do love this Halo thing. It's kind of brighter and more Halo-like in Season 2, but the point is that, the Sublime is kind of like heaven, so naturally you wear a halo in order to go to heaven, like an angelic sort of a thing, which I think is cool imagery. But yeah, Bernard just plugs himself into the Sublime, and we don't know why. We don't know what he does there, but then he unplugs himself a long time later. So it seems to be just setting up for Season 4 what was actually going on there, which is kind of infuriating, but there you go. Was Stubbs a mole? So in Season 3, there were hosts who were stolen from Westworld, and Maeve was one of those stolen hosts, and Charloris found out that she or human Charlotte was a mole who was used by Serac. But there was also talk of a second mole, or at least the fans thought that there was a second mole, because it was assumed that Charlotte couldn't have been the only mole, because the Maeve Pearl was stolen after human Charlotte was dead, as far as we know. And Serac has a line about, do you think that you're the only person who I control? So some people were like, well, okay, Serac must have a second person working for him, and maybe that person is Stubbs. Because Stubbs was at Westworld for a long time, and maybe he would have had access to stealing those hosts. But I don't think Stubbs was a mole. I don't think Stubbs does have a secret agenda, because they just didn't ever talk about it. And even, throughout the season, they never really actually talked about this idea of the second mole outside of Serac mentioning other people under his control. So I don't think that was really a subplot that we were meant to really be thinking about, honestly. And I think the only reveal that we're meant to get excited about with Stubbs is the fact that he's a host, Not everyone has a secret motivation, at least not secondary characters. I mean, that's why I think that reveal might not have worked, because Stubbs is quite a minor character, He's like a tertiary character. And I don't think there would have been a lot of emotional weight if it was like, whoa, Stubbs betrayed us. Like, come on, Stubbs is not a very in-depth character, so I don't think it would make sense for him to be a mole. The person in Berlin is Lawrence Loris. And you ask about Maeve and Caleb. I mean, it is curious what their relationship would be. I tend to think that they will go separate paths after this apocalyptic moment that they share. Like Caleb, we're told, is going to be a leader of the revolution, whatever that means. I don't know if Caleb's going to continue to be a leader of the revolution, or if he's just going to find his own life and his own path. I wonder if Caleb will even appear in season 4. I imagine that Aaron Paul is an expensive actor to hire, and I don't know if we need to see him. I don't know. I don't know. But Maeve, presumably, her goal is to get back into the sublime, whereas human Caleb will be doing human things, I expect. So I don't know if that will be a partnership, especially seeing as they were trying to kill each other not that long ago. So I wouldn't expect them to hang out. Thanks for the super chat from Chris, who says, so you're definitely going to do videos on Dune. Not 100% confirmed yet, because I want to have a good think about it and which series we're going to follow up on. I think that the new series I'm most likely to do this year are going to be His Dark Materials and Dune. I think those are the most likely. I'd like to do Dark, but Dark is like not all that popular. And there's a lot more demand for like His Dark Materials and Dune. And in the future, there's talk of like Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time. I'd like to check out Devs. There's a million possibilities. So I'll just do whatever I think would make the best videos, basically. But I think Dune is pretty likely. Thanks, Savannah, who says, Man in Black's demise is about evil casting aside free will. I mean, it's weird with William because, you know, this season it was so interesting when he said, "Hey, like I'm rejecting my past selves," and he killed his past selves in that therapy scene when he murdered all these past versions of himself, which was about rejecting his past evil, or at least so I thought. He seemed to be freeing himself. He seemed to be getting his free will back by defeating his past. And he said, I'm the good guy. But then he said that the way that I'm being a good guy is by wiping out the hosts. So it's like, well, that seems like he's achieved free will, but he's continuing to be violent and destructive. So maybe he hasn't achieved free will at all. And then at the end of the episode, when he gets trapped into his loop, into his fidelity loop, that only supports the idea that he has no free will, right? If he can be, you know, replaced with robots. So I guess we've left William in the same place that he was in at the end of season 2. Like, he has no free will, and now he's trapped in this loop, and he's violent and destructive. So my question is, like, if he hasn't changed, then what was the point of all this stuff that he went through this season? What was the point of killing his past selves? What was the point of all this introspection and therapy and stuff if he just ends up right where he was before, you know? So yeah, I think William's arc, or lack thereof, was a bit disappointing this season. But thanks for the super chat from Nicholas, who points out that this poster of the post-apocalyptic wasteland seems to be in Dubai. And Jack says, only idea we get of the Man in Black's ideals, of the mob's ideals, are the graffiti drawings of the maze that weren't explained, and signs that say stuff like, don't code me bro, so the show can separate itself from the real world. Yeah, so the whole rebellion and the rioting that we see, it just seems to have the sort of nebulous motivation of freeing itself from Insight and Rehoboam, because they got all of that data when Dolores leaked everyone's Insight profiles. So that's an understandable sort of a reaction to have, I suppose. But yeah, we don't know what it means for, like, Caleb to be a leader of that revolution, you know? And I think one of the most interesting bits was when we saw Dolores controlling and directing aspects of the riot. We see that the riot is partly being done on the Rico app. And there's a moment when Dolores gets on her phone and she, like, uses money to incentivize the rioters to go to different sectors of the city. So, like, it's a riot, it's chaos, but it's a controlled chaos that Dolores is manipulating through the Rico app. And one of the other, like, complexities is that we just found out that the Rico app is built by, and to some extent controlled by or used by, Rehoboam and Serac. So it seems like this really weird contradictory thing where, like, it's a riot and it's about freedom, but it's also directed by an app that was built by the corporation that they are rioting against. you know, which I suppose is not dissimilar to, some things that happen in the real world where, people are, there have been protests against technology companies in the real world, and sometimes those protests have been organized on the platforms of those very technology companies, People have talked about the importance of Twitter in like the Arab Spring and the importance of like WhatsApp in organizing protests. And sometimes there's a conflict of interest between those technology companies who are providing that service, sometimes being part of the powers that are being protested against. So there's a really interesting sort of swirling mess of different sort of motivations and structures in terms of free will versus control. So we'll definitely explore that in the explained video. In terms of like the maze symbol itself, I mean, in season 1 that was about humans. That was about hosts escaping the control of the park and finding consciousness, and it was about an inner journey, traveling inside yourself and your memories in order to learn who you are and what your past is, in order to become conscious and have a future. And I think they are using that idea in a somewhat different way in this season with the humans when they're saying that it's not an inner journey, it's more about an escape outside of the maze, and the maze represents more control because the Insight logo looks like a maze in the shape of a globe. So I think this maze symbol is meant to be a symbol of freedom from that tyranny. And of course, it doesn't necessarily make sense that people are using the same symbol that the hosts of Westworld were using. Like, how do they know that symbol? I guess you could theorize that, maybe someone who went to Westworld as a guest saw those maze symbols that Akichita put everywhere. Like, the maze symbol was on all of those scalps throughout season 1 and such. And I wonder if, someone might literally have seen that symbol and it struck a chord with them, and that's why we're seeing it in the real world. But symbolically, it's about escaping control. Thanks for the super chat from Quoth the Raven, who says, I noticed that Rehoboam spoke to Maeve in Sirach's voice, but Sirach was begging Jean-Mi to speak to him when Rehoboam locked him out. Thoughts? Yeah, I thought that was odd, because, we had Rehoboam speaking with a voice, which was interesting. Because, as soon as we saw Solomon last episode talking with Jean-Mi's voice, I'm like, well, maybe Rehoboam speaks with Sirach's voice. And indeed, we saw that, but Sirach seemed to be hearing Jean-Mi's voice in Rehoboam, perhaps. I mean, I'll note that Solomon last episode said, like, hey, I can speak in whatever voice you want. Solomon offered to speak in Caleb's voice and offered to speak in other voices. So maybe Rehoboam also can speak in many voices, and maybe Jean-Mi's voice is the voice that Sirach wants to hear from Rehoboam, which is ironic because Jean-Mi did not build Rehoboam. Jean-Mi built Solomon, and Solomon was the more unstable and chaotic AI, whereas Rehoboam was the more controlled AI like Sirach. So, it is interesting that Sirach connected Rehoboam to Jean-Mi when it's quite the opposite. I think basically the significance of Jean-Mi, of Sirach calling for Jean-Mi, is just to remind us that he does have that human motivation. Sirach may be an evil dude, but he, at the heart of it, he is partly motivated by his love for his brother and the trauma that they suffered in Paris, and trying to protect himself and others from suffering that same trauma, which is an extremely understandable motivation, I think. Thanks to poor man John Doe, who says, last week I super chatted and stated that the Sublime hosts are evolving at a faster rate. Do you think Bernard saw the super evolved hosts? So the Sublime does have a whole bunch of hosts in it. In season 2, we had this whole pilgrimage to the door to the Sublime, and a whole bunch of these hosts went through into this paradise. They've been sitting there, dozens of hosts at least, for ever since season 2. And Poor Man Joe is saying that we have seen simulations in this story running at super fast speed. There's this sort of offhand comment that Maeve makes about the Warworld simulation, saying that this Warworld simulation runs faster in the simulation, so it looks like, relatively speaking, the real world is running more slowly. So I think what poor man Joe is saying is that maybe all these hosts in the simulation, maybe that simulation is also running at fast speed, and maybe these hosts have, built a civilization in this Windows XP bucolic paradise. Maybe these hosts have been doing stuff, because we don't really know what people do in the Sublime all day. Are they just frolicking in fields 24/7, or are they building cities and water parks and ice cream stands? You'd want to do stuff in heaven, right? So, what have they been up to, is the question. I don't think that they're necessarily running at fast speed, because we did have this shot where the folks in the Forge were watching the Sublime, in real time, so it looked like it was parallel time. Although that was from inside the Forge, which might also be running at fast time. So, yeah, you might be right, poor man Joe. Maybe they have been running at super speed. But it will be very fascinating to find out what actually happens in the Sublime. In Season 2, we were told that, it's possible for the hosts to be whoever they want to be in there. It's possible for them to be free and to choose a future. So you would think that, there's actually cities and art and, concerts and pogo sticks and stuff that people would want to do in heaven, There must be something happening. And Bernard might have been involved in that stuff when he was plugged into the Sublime for all that time. Thanks for the super chat from Build It Up and from Late, who says, I think it's interesting that we had 2 seasons where the bad guys' hands were blown up by their weapons. William's gun and Sirac's control box for Maeve. Yeah, that's a really good point. Because, in Season 2, Episode 10, we saw William try to shoot Dolores with his gun, but then the gun exploded in his hand, and that's what blew off his fingers, and that's why he's wearing a finger glove this season. And indeed, Sirac tried to control Maeve this episode by pressing his magic beeper, but the beeper inexplicably exploded? Really not sure why that happened. I think the point is that, Maeve used her sort of psychic Wi-Fi powers to be able to overcome the control of the beeper, and used her free will and wasn't controlled after all, which is it's cool and all, but it's come on, if that was possible, then why did Maeve ever obey Sirac, the thing that changed Maeve's mind this episode was when Dolores explained that, I actually see the good in humanity, and I'm not trying to wipe out the humans. I see the beauty, and I sympathize with you, Maeve. And I guess that's what changed Maeve's mind into wanting to help the humans. Because that's kind of what happened, isn't it? Maeve's goal had been that she wanted to reunite with her daughter in the Sublime, but she was willing to postpone that to instead help Caleb and humanity by fighting against Sirac. So Maeve saw the good in humanity because of Dolores' speech, and that's why she turned against Sirac. And, it would have saved them a lot of trouble if Dolores gave that speech earlier, so that Maeve didn't have to constantly fight Dolores throughout this season. I think that conflict still feels a bit contrived, and I think that Maeve's storylines was one of the weaker ones this season, just because, it was very static, It was just Maeve allowing herself to be controlled by this asshole Sirac, and then deciding at the very end, whoop, actually, that was a dumb idea, wasn't it? I'll actually just kill Sirac, So, and she still has that same motivation that she's had for 2 seasons now, which is finding her daughter in the Sublime. And it just feels like she's not growing and changing that much. But I'm glad she came to her senses at the end of this episode. Thanks from Kristen B, who says, after seeing this episode, any thoughts on what Solomon's warning to Caleb was last episode? So, yes, last episode, Solomon gave Caleb this plan, this strategy for revolution, and Caleb was like, cool, let's plug it in, let's revolve the world, and Solomon was like, oh, I better tell you one last thing, but then he got powered down before he could warn Caleb. And I think what he was going to warn Caleb is what that strategy actually does, which is end the fucking world. That strategy would have freed humanity from Rehoboam, but it also would have apparently led to mass population casualty events, and it would have led to the extinction of humanity. Apparently. Yeah, here it is. Mass casualty events in 6 to 10 years. Population collapse. End of human civilization in 5 to 125 years. This is the strategy that Solomon gave Caleb. And my question is, why? Because in the end, we didn't use this strategy. In the end, Serac crushed that strategy on the little USB stick under his boot. That strategy was never used, and yet humanity was able to free itself from Rehoboam anyway by Caleb shutting down Rehoboam. So you got to wonder, does shutting down Rehoboam, is that going to cause these apocalyptic events to happen anyway? It certainly seems so, because we saw this, dusty post-apocalyptic landscape. So is the end of the world going to happen? And if the end of the world was going to happen even without plugging in this strategy, then why did they need this strategy? Why did Dolores create this strategy in the first place at all? I don't know if I'm missing something here, but I don't know what the point of this apocalyptic strategy is if they didn't need it in order to free everyone from Rehoboam. I guess maybe this was just a clumsy way to illustrate the fact that this is the price of freedom. We are turning off Rehoboam, we are escaping, but we're also condemning ourselves to extinction. That whole plot line with the strategy is very strange to me. I think part of the reveal here was the idea that Dolores wasn't putting her faith in the algorithm and controlling everything. She was putting her faith in Caleb. And so I think that, we were told that Dolores' motivation for going and meeting Solomon was in order to get this critically important strategy, but it turns out her real motivation was, her main motivation in going to that facility was giving Caleb his memories so that he could be free and he could make choices and Dolores could trust him to lead the revolution. So I think that's what the idea is. In the end, it wasn't about algorithms, it was about choice. And this strategy is apparently irrelevant, I guess. Yeah, all right. Thanks for the super chat from Steve, who says, love your content. Will Evan Rachel Woods return next season? I really hope so, and I hope she can gain her memories back. Yeah, we talked a bit about this. I agree that Evan Rachel Wood is Westworld, and it just wouldn't be the same without her. And I think that it's possible that she could just get her memories from Lawrence Loris, or from Musashi Loris or Martin Loris, whose brains are still out there somewhere. And, these characters have diverged from the original Dolores a bit, but I think that you could plug their brains into the Dolores body and it would still more or less be Dolores. So, yeah, I think that Dolores will return in Season 4. I certainly hope so. Adam, the Camus guy, says, read The Myth of Sisyphus. It's happier. Also, do me a solid and do a video series of the Austin Powers trilogy. Please and thank you. Well, we've got to do April Fool's videos. And I'm always looking for ridiculous topics to cover in April Fool's videos, like the Cookie Clicker video and the Game of Bones video. So, hey, maybe we need Gold Member Explained. As for the Myth of Sisyphus, maybe we could read it on Alt-Shift-Z-Z-Z. We do have a side channel where I just read books, mostly old books. Kind of the joke is that they're really boring and they'll put you to sleep, but kind of the truth is that it's an excuse to just read cool stuff. So, yeah, maybe we'll read the Myth of Sisyphus. Thanks to Peter Rufus, who says, there is a post-credit scene with Hale, Dolores, and the Man in Black printing new hosts. Yeah, I think that's printing a whole bunch of copies of William so that he can be put into the loop that we saw at the end of Season 2, Episode 10. Thanks for the super chat from Raza, who says, were all the people Serac had frozen freed? If so, would that include Jean-Mi? Great work on all the videos for this season. Yeah, I mean, part of the tragedy of the tragedy of Darth Serac the Wise is that Serac died without getting to unfreeze his beloved brother Jean-Mi. Because last time we saw Jean-Mi, he was still a popsicle boy in Mexico. And Serac was intending on thawing him out and bringing him back to the world after he was reprogrammed and controllable. But that never happened. And a lot of people were speculating that, when that EMP went off, how did that affect Jean-Mi? And how did that affect the thousands of people who were kept frozen in this facility? I suspect that they're not all dead, because if they were all dead, I feel like the story would have acknowledged that. The story would have said, hey, by the way, you killed 1,000 people, Dolores. So, I don't know, I guess the backup refrigerator power kicked in and they're all still alive. but we don't really know. I liked the idea that maybe these thousands of outliers would join the rioting and they would join this revolution, because those people were all outliers. They were all people who rebel against Sirach's control. So I would have thought it was fitting if they joined in here. And I thought that, when Caleb was approached by these randos and they said, "Sir, it's our job to help you in the revolution, John Connor, sir." I thought maybe those were outlier people who had come out of the fridges, but I guess not. Thanks for the super chat from Visionary, who said, "Do we know for sure how long Bernard has been there in the Sublime?" Great videos for this season, by the way. Thanks, Visionary. Well, it looks like a long-ass time, because he's covered in dust. And we don't know a date, but we do know that after season 2, episode 10, when we saw William trapped in the future and there was like sand and dust around him, Lisa Joy, the co-showrunner, said that I think she said hundreds of years, that have been in there for hundreds of years. So I think that's the kind of timescale that we're dealing with here, but we haven't got an actual date. Thanks, John Pertelzik, and thanks, Adam, who says, "Just like how Bernard lost his cornerstone and was able to move on, Sirach lost his and was left without purpose." Well, yeah, so, we had this scene where Bernard went and met with Lauren. So Lauren is the mother of Charlie, who is the son of Arnold. I thought this person looked really weird. And I found out after the episode that this is the same actress who played Lauren in very brief flashbacks previously, but wearing a bunch of prosthetics to make her look old. This is Lauren as we saw her in season 1, episode 3, and this is how she appears now because it's 30 years later. And I thought that I thought the hair and stuff looked weird or something, and yeah, she's wearing a whole bunch of prosthetics, just so that she's the same person as who we very briefly saw here. It seems kind of unnecessary to use the same actress because, very few people will have remembered this extremely brief image that we saw of her. But the point of this scene was that Bernard was sort of revisiting and confronting his memories of Charlie, because Bernard keeps because Charlie and the death of Charlie is the cornerstone memory on which Bernard's personality was founded. This is Charlie. And even though Charlie is Arnold's son, not Bernard's son, because Bernard is a robot, this memory of Arnold is still key to who Bernard is, even though he never met the real Charlie. So by talking to Lauren and by revisiting that grief and that trauma, he's able to sort of reconnect with his past. And it is an interesting parallel, I think, to compare that to Sirach and Jean-Mi, because Sirach's, the destruction of Paris and the way that Sirach has lost Jean-Mi by freezing Jean-Mi is similar. And I don't think that losing the person takes away the purpose. I think losing the purpose might almost give you the purpose. It wasn't Charlie's life so much as Charlie's death that defines Bernard, And Ford talks about how with the cornerstones, it is the tragic memories that work best. So I think it's the loss, it's the death of the loved one that propels the purpose in the future, and I think that's true of Sirach as well. I think. I don't think Sirach would have been so determined to take over the world and control everything if he hadn't lost his brother, even though it's his own damn fault because he chose to freeze his brother. Thanks for the super chat from Dylan, who says, "Why did Sirach keep Caleb alive and not kill him when he had the chance?" Man, you can ask that of every supervillain in fiction, I swear. They never kill the hero. The Bond villain always has to give the monologue before he does anything. Yeah, I think we just have to put that down to human fallibility, because Sirach may be plugged into the greatest Oracle supercomputer in the world, but he still makes human mistakes and has human weaknesses, and I think that's why he failed. Thank you, Benjamin Ashley, who says, "Was in not ultimately Rehoboam's plan to be plugged into Dolores? Is it then not possible that Rehoboam had a motive separate from Sirach's plan to control the world?" Hey, you could theorize that maybe Rehoboam, with all of its data, with all of its memory, with all of its projections, and all of its intelligence, it was able to find some kind of free will and some kind of spark of consciousness separate to what Serac wants, to use it as a mere engine of control. In the same way that Solomon became kind of conscious. Solomon became unstable. Solomon inherited the chaotic nature of its creator, Jean-Mi. So maybe Rehoboam secretly, on some level, became sympathetic to the hosts and to Dolores, and maybe Rehoboam chose to go off Serac's plan and to actually help Dolores and Caleb. I think that is a perfectly valid theory. I don't think there's anything that directly supports that in this episode, but I think that is a valid interpretation. AW Lids says, who controls Delos now, and what'll happen to the Westworld Park? That's a good question, because Delos was bought by Serac, and now Serac seems to be dead, or at least not in a position to be controlling a company. So what happens to the Westworld parks? I mean, it was looking pretty grim when D&D and Drogon were just sort of languishing in the Mesa, and apparently there were no guests there, and Westworld seems to be, for most intents and purposes, shut down. And I wonder if it'll stay that way. I don't imagine that robot tourism is going to be a thriving industry in the aftermath of the anti-insight revolution. So I suppose Westworld will be abandoned. I suppose that Westworld will be left in this sort of ruinous state, which I think would be a great setting for television. I would love to see an exploration of post-apocalyptic abandoned Westworld. And supposedly the hosts have been burned and destroyed, but I wonder if there might still be a few errant hosts wandering around the ruins of the park where they were born. I think that would be a really interesting setting for some Westworldian meditations on purpose and creation and indeed abandonment after your gods are dead. What do the robots do when they're left abandoned? It's like the toys in Toy Story when they just get dumped in the box and forgotten by the people who owned them. What do the hosts do after everyone else has left? Thanks for the super chat from Brian, who says, Season 2 William post-credit scene has to be a real version of William in a host body. Man in Black can't be truly William because of fidelity issue. So what Brian is saying is that, we saw in Season 2 this guy James Delos. There was this attempt to turn him into an immortal host version of himself. And what they found was that they couldn't do it. They tried to make a faithful copy of James, but he kept on breaking down because his mind just rejected his body. So over and over they failed to make a faithful copy. That's a really good point. Like, if it's impossible to make a perfectly faithful copy, then how can this William possibly be a faithful host copy of William? I mean, they did say in Season 2 with James that, we've done like 100 repetitions and maybe we'll be able to get it right with 100 more. So they are sort of leaving the door open to maybe they could make a faithful copy. But that would kind of undercut the idea, the concept of, humans not accepting that kind of faithful copy. So I'm not sure. I mean, are they contradicting themselves here, or are they saying that it's just a better copy, or maybe William is unique. Like maybe William's brain would accept being in a host body. Maybe they just have more data on William because he's been in the park so much. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. How can they make a faithful host copy of William when they couldn't make a faithful host copy of James? Thanks for the super chat from Ryan, who says, who is Dolores addressing in her opening monologue? She's referring to a man, which I hope is Ford, but we can't tell for sure. It's definitely conversational. Thanks for streaming. Are you referring to the monologue here? So what does she say? She says that some people see the ugliness in the world, but I see the beauty. But I was taught a lie. She saw the world for what it really was when she escaped Westworld. I traded one role for another, but my path left me here to you. We have choices to make. I suppose this might just be a preamble to what we see later in the episode when Maeve sort of enters Dolores' mind and they have this conversation about goodness and choice and humanity. I think maybe she's conversing with Maeve here. But there were some interesting parts in that monologue. So I thought it was interesting that, she talks about trading one role for another. And she's referring here to in season 2 when she became this genocidal Terminator and she went around gunning down humans for sport. And she describes that as a role, which I think is significant because we learned about Wyatt in episode 1. Wyatt was this villainous personality that was programmed into Dolores by Arnold so that she would kill him. And Wyatt had these masked men as part of his storyline. And so in season 2, Dolores has these masked men who are like helping her commit her atrocities. So, all through season 2, we had to ask, like, is Dolores truly free and conscious? Or is she actually just playing another role? She's just being Wyatt. And I think that this sort of, in this episode, it sort of supports that idea. That was a role that she was playing. So we still got to wonder, like, to what extent is Dolores ever free? And I guess you got to ask, like, if you can't tell the difference, does it matter? Because we all make choices based on our past experiences and our influences, right? Just because Arnold introduced this idea of Wyatt to Dolores, that doesn't mean that she's not making the choice. She's choosing to be Wyatt. We can only ever make choices based on the ideas and the behaviors that we're exposed to, right? So what's the difference between programming and making decisions based on past experiences, If you can't tell the difference, doesn't matter. So as ever, Westworld, it gets pretty mindfucky if you think about it. And we saw some nice sort of new footage of Dolores being a painter. In season 1, she was programmed to do these paintings out in the beauty, the natural splendor of the world. We also saw this shot of Dolores being dressed up as a sort of a eye candy to be at that party in season 2 when James Delos and William were having a party, and we saw Dolores just sort of playing the piano and just being objectified as, like, an object to provide scenery at this party. So we just see all the different experiences that Dolores has had, and you see good things and bad things. But overall, the conclusion of this moment is Dolores saying that I choose to see the beauty. And when she says it now, it has like a dramatically different meanings than it had in season 1. Because in season 1, when Dolores said, I choose to see the beauty, like, that was a programmed line that showed how she was naive and controlled, and she didn't really know what she was talking about, because at that time, Dolores didn't know what the real world was like. She didn't know that she was a robot in a theme park. She didn't have her memories. She didn't have consciousness. So when she said, I choose to see the beauty, it was kind of empty when she said that. She was blind to the horrors in the world. But what she's saying in this monologue is that she has now seen the evils. She has seen terrible things. But she's also seen the good, and she has become conscious now. She's gone on this journey, and she's won her freedom. And now, with the benefit of all that sight, she chooses to see the beauty. And this time it actually means something. This time she actually knows what she's choosing. She's aware of the evil now. And that makes it all the more meaningful that she chooses the good. So it's the most optimistic moment in Westworld, I think. Like, this is the moment that Westworld says, hey, maybe we can be positive. Maybe we can see the good in the world. Season 1 was all about how humans are evil, murderous rapists, and season 2 was all about how humans have no free will. And this season is about Dolores seeing the good in humanity, choosing to see the good, because there is both good and bad. So that's quite lovely. I kind of like that we're doing something that is not brutally cynical and misanthropic and nihilistic, because it's not just rose-colored glasses. Dolores is not denying that humanity does terrible things. She's just saying that there is good and there is bad, and what's important is that we have the capacity to choose the good. And that's why she chooses Caleb. That's why she invests and trusts in Caleb, is because she recognizes that Caleb has the good and the bad. You've done terrible things and you've done generous things. She didn't pick you for your capacity for violence, but for your capacity to choose. Which I think is, I think that's real. I think that is a truer exploration of human nature than season 2 was. Because season 2 said that humans have no free will either way. humans are just bad or humans are just good. But I think season 3 is more truthful when it says that, there's good in humans, there's bad in humans. What's important is that we can distinguish between those things. So I think that's cool. Thanks for the super chat from Particular Coconut, who says, now that we've seen this compressed season play out, what would you have preferred to see time spent on if this was a regular length season? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a big question. What could we have spent more time on? Well, I think one obvious thing that was ridiculous was last episode when Dolores just Caleb casually mentions to Dolores, "Oh, so yeah, you're a robot, right? You murdered a bunch of people, right? Yeah, okay." And we get no exploration of what was Caleb's emotional reaction to finding out that Evan Rachel Wood's this cool rebellious person who he's been hanging out with is actually a robot who kills people and escaped from a theme park. Like, what? How does Caleb not have 1,000 questions? Like how is he not saying, "Oh my god, Dolores, you're a robot. Can you do any cool tricks? Do you take AAA batteries? Do you get to eat? Do you short circuit if you go in water? What do you think about Westworld? What do you think about humans? What's the square root of 5,900? Do you run on Linux?" Like, there's so many exciting reactions that Caleb could have to Dolores being a robot. And we didn't get to see the scene of Dolores realizing that and Dolores thinking that. And I mean, I guess that's partially redeemed in this episode, because we do have this revelation that Caleb, at least in a past life, was familiar with the idea of hosts, because Caleb was trained with the army in a Westworld park with hosts. So Caleb has been to Westworld and does know what hosts are, or at least, in some past memory he was. So I guess that partly explains why Caleb wasn't super shocked that Dolores is a robot. Even though at this point I don't think he was meant to have those memories, so it's kind of wonky. But we do at least now know what all of the Westworld parks are, because we had that revelation of this army training park, which to me seems a little bit unnecessary, since we've already got War World, right? I mean, what are they calling this park if not War World? Are they calling it Training Park, War Crimes Park? Like, there's this whole thing about this guy wants to have sex with the hosts and Caleb stops them, and this is the moment that Dolores recognizes human good and human free will in Caleb, because he protests against them raping these hosts. So much of this series is fixated on sexual assault as the marker of whether humans are good or not, which is a thing. But yeah, I guess that's one answer to the question of what would you have liked to have seen explored more. I would have liked to have seen Caleb's reaction to Dolores, at least. Something else that I'd like to see more is what was the deal with Musashi? Like, they just sort of quietly had they just sort of implied what would have been a fascinating story. Like you're telling me that Dolores copied her brain into a copy of Musashi, who is a host in Shogun World, a samurai warrior whose body Dolores is inhabiting. And she, over a period of 3 months, infiltrated the Yakuza in Singapore, pretending to be a human, pretending to be Musashi, pretending to be a human, and she was running a secret host manufacturing facility with white goo, which, by the way, where did that go? What happened to that host goo? What was it used for? I don't know. I would like to think that host goo might have been used to manufacture these William hosts at the end of the episode, but that was Charloris doing that, and Charloris killed Musashi. So did Charloris kill Musashi and take the host goo to make the Williams? Or are we overthinking it? But what I was saying was that Musashi must have had a pretty incredible story infiltrating the Yakuza, and posing as a human and carrying out Dolores' plan. I think you could make an entire season of TV about that story. So that's another thing that I would have liked to have seen more exploration of. Thanks for the super chat from Build It Up, who says Serac was not right. There is no reason to believe that R's last prediction was genuine. We've already seen that Rehoboam is no more above lying than any other actor, and it is not quite infallible. When did Rehoboam lie? I don't recall seeing Rehoboam lying. I mean, there was that conversation last episode where Dolores said it doesn't work. Dolores says to Solomon that this system of control doesn't work. And at first I was like, ooh, they're saying that the robots are infallible. But I think what Dolores was actually saying in that moment was that the reconditioning program doesn't work because many hosts actually... Many humans are not reconditioned and get put in the freezers. I don't know if we've actually seen any evidence of Rehoboam making mistakes and his predictions being wrong. Well, no, actually we do, because we saw Ash this season when Liam said that Ash was going to rob Liam and take him for everything he's got, but Ash instead killed Liam and didn't rob him, which is apparently not what Liam predicted, because Ash says, I guess I do have a choice. So I think that was meant to be a moment of Ash going off Rehoboam's prediction. And you know, I mean, they're always meant to be fuzzy, because like if we look at like Caleb's profile, you know, it doesn't predict... I mean, it does predict that Caleb will commit suicide on a particular pier on a particular time, but it's a range of dates. It's like, yeah, suicide in 10 to 12 years. So like it's not that precise, it's just an estimation. So there is a fuzziness to the predictions. So like, yeah, we shouldn't assume that they're like perfectly accurate all the time. So by that logic, we can also question whether Rehoboam's prediction of apocalypse is accurate. But I mean, if it's not accurate, then like, what's the point of Rehoboam? Like, what's the point of Sirac's storyline? I think that Sirac and Rehoboam are most interesting if they genuinely are trying to stop the apocalypse, but they're doing these immoral, controlling things in order to do it. If they're wrong and they're not stopping the apocalypse, then it's like, well, you know, they're just dumb. They're just wrong. Yeah, I don't know. Thanks for the super chat from Eric, who says, did the virtual assistant help Caleb get the Dolores Pearl? Thanks for your help with so much of the plot, themes, and references. So, we did see Caleb, apparently he retrieved Dolores' Pearl out of her head after the EMP put her down. And then he went for a little motorbike ride, and then he was listening to Dolores' virtual assistant in order to break into this facility. It seems to be another branch of the Itaidoshin distillery, which means one mind in many bodies. And yeah, the virtual assistant directs Caleb to this place that has this creepy coffin that has a Dolores body inside, so he restores Dolores back into her brain. Which I think is a little bit of a missed opportunity in the sense that there was this concept of the bicameral mind in the past, because in season 1, Dolores listened to Arnold's voice telling her what to do until she realized at the end that voice was actually her own inner voice all along, and it was actually her path to consciousness. And so now in this season, we had Caleb listening to this voice and following its instructions. And I thought they were going to find out that, whoa, it's actually Caleb's inner voice and he's actually conscious, but no, it really was Siri all along. It really was just the virtual assistant, which is a little lame, but whatever. Thanks for the super chat from Najrom, who says, thoughts on Marshawn Lynch getting an equal length death scene to William. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? They literally spent as much time on Marshawn Lynch dying as they did on William, the 3-season-long story arc, dying. I mean, I guess that, you know, I guess that William's death scene, like, in so many ways, he's already dead. I mean, they literally declared him deceased last episode, and he's kind of been, you know, a walking corpse even before that, in the way that, you know, he's lost everything, and he has no purpose, and he's been beat up and defeated so many times. Like, William was kind of already dead in certain ways. But yeah, they did spend a lot of time with Marshawn Lynch. I mean, I mean, we saw him like charging his way through like the riot barricades and like knocking people over and stuff, almost as though he was a football player. So I mean, that was kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they spent enough time with Ash and Giggles for us to really be like super emotionally invested in what was going on with them. But it made sense that they turned up for the revolution at the end, I think. Thanks for the donation from John, who says, Dark is screaming for analysis. There's nothing in media as mind-bending as Dark. What other series do fans watch with paper and pencil to update family trees in real time? Yeah, I mean, look, Dark is a really cool show. Dark is a TV show on Netflix. It's German. I won't give anything away, but it's all about like mystery, and it's quite complicated, and it's family, and it's drama. People compare it to Stranger Things. It's a bit like Stranger Things, except less about children and less about like movie pastiche, and more about like, you know, family history, secrets, genealogy, relationships, trauma. I think Dark is a really good show. I mean, we held a survey a while back to choose a series to do among patrons, and Dark just wasn't all that popular, and that's part of why we might not do a video about it. But I mean, you're right, John. Like, it is a fucking great show. So maybe we'll just YOLO it and do a video on it anyway. Because season 3 is coming out at some point. So maybe once we've got like a release date for Dark season 3, maybe we'll be able to do a like Dark so far, like the first 2 seasons explained before season 3 comes out, or maybe we'll explain season 3 after it comes out. I think that might be possible, because yeah, Dark is a cool show. So I don't know, we'll see what happens. It kind of depends what's going on at the time. It's quite hard to plan because the coronavirus has delayed the production of a whole bunch of TV shows, including The Stand and Why the Last Man, which are both shows about pandemics. So yeah, the world imitates art, fiction imitates whatever, you know the saying. Has anyone read Why the Last Man? It's a really cool comic book, and this isn't a spoiler, but the premise of Why the Last Man is that there's a virus that instantly kills every man. Every mammal with a Y chromosome in the world dies in the same moment, except for the protagonist and his monkey. And it's the adventures of that person in this strange new world, and it's a really cool story. But they've been trying to make it into a movie or a TV show for ages. It's been in development hell, and they did announce a TV series of Why the Last Man on FX, but they like had to fire the main actor, and it got delayed. So I don't know if it's even happening anymore. I'm curious about The Stand. The Stand is a doorstopper book by Stephen King about the apocalypse and pandemic, and it seems cool. I haven't read it yet, but it looks interesting, and they're making a mini-series about it. Someone in the chat says, please do a His Dark Materials versus the books. Yeah, I actually think, just quietly, that might be the next video we do, would be a His Dark Materials episode 1 versus the books. So we just like go through episode by episode and talk about how each episode compares to what happens in the books. Or maybe we just do like an overall video about just what happened in season 1 and how that compares to the books. But yeah, no, we'll get back to Westworld. Don't worry, we won't get off topic. I'll catch up on some super chats. So thanks, Dalton. Thanks, Guaoman, who says, just watched the episode. What's the status of Charloris? So Charloris seems to be a weird enigma right now, because Charloris got exploded the other episode, and she's a bit cross about it. And this episode caused Dolores to be trapped. They didn't really explain exactly how or why Charloris did it, or how she did it. But it seems as though Charloris managed to like paralyze Dolores so that she was captured by Serac after her fight with Maeve. You took measures to ensure that you could control me, and why would I do any different? So that actually kind of does make sense. The idea is that Dolores put some kind of backdoor, some kind of control, some kind of like smash glass in case she goes crazy button in Charloris. And since that they're just copies of each other, then Charloris was able to do the same thing to Dolores. So she has some kind of control to be able to disable Dolores, and she used that in order to get Dolores captured by Serac. So apparently this was like revenge for the way that Charloris feels wronged by Dolores, in the way that Dolores used her copies and sent them into their deaths, which makes sense that Charloris is mad at Dolores because she was, used by Dolores. But also, like, again, like, Charloris is really helping Serac by giving Serac Dolores. And it's a bit silly that Charloris is willing to help Serac when Serac murdered her family. Like, Serac is who Charlotte should really be mad at, I think. Just like Maeve realized that Serac is the one that she should be mad at. So I think that it's a little bit silly in the way that Charloris attacks Dolores and not Serac. But yeah, she's her own woman now, and she's escaped from being a pawn of Dolores. And at the end, she captures William in Dubai, which is a bit weird because, like, the whole William getting trapped in a loop thing, I liked the idea that was engineered by Emily and by Ford, because we saw Emily last season had this map with this Delos symbol on it that was really intriguing. Can I pull that up real quick? Yeah, she had this hex symbol on this map, and it looked like she had some like secret Delos plan. And it was a host of Emily that we see at the end of Season 2, Episode 10, who's like controlling William and keeping him trapped in a loop. And I think it also connects to Ford, because Ford in Season 2, Episode 1, or at least like the boy version of Ford, he was talking about like you're stuck in you've got to find the door, you've got to find the way out, is what Ford, or boy Ford, told William, which seems to me to be like thematically what William's fidelity loop trap is about. So I thought it would make sense if it was Ford and Emily who worked together to trap William in this loop. I thought that would have been really cool. I thought that was what they were suggesting. But it turns out that Charloris is the one who traps William. And I guess, Charloris is a copy of Dolores, so she has all of the anger at William that Dolores has. So I suppose that it makes sense for her to want to punish William by putting him in this loop. But I'm still curious about what the point of this loop is. I thought that the loop was about finding human free will. That's what like Lisa Joy implied in interviews. But we've already established that humans have free will this episode. So I am curious about what Charloris's motivations are, and hopefully we'll find out more in Season 4. And I'm glad that Tessa Thompson continues to be part of Westworld, because I think she did some pretty incredible acting in Episode 3 and elsewhere, so it's cool for her to be a part of it. Thank you, Dalton, who says, so all of Dolores's memories are gone? Yes, I think that's what happened. I think what we saw is the end of the Dolores we know. That's kind of what Dolores' actress Evan Rachel Wood says here, saying goodbye to this version of Dolores. So it seems as though her memories were deleted one by one, and this Dolores is, for all intents and purposes, dead. But I think we will still see Dolores again, because copies of her mind exist in Lawrence and in Musashi and in Martin. So I think we will hopefully see Evan Rachel Wood confirmed. Thank you, Rainy HP, who says, did any part of the finale work for you? I didn't love the finale, but Maeve Dolores scene did make me a bit teary. I think the music always gets me. Ramon Juwadi always kills it with the music. I think that this finale, I'm surprised by how little happened in the finale, to be honest. Like, there was a lot of sort of running around and fighting and stuff, but like, Bernard kind of didn't do anything this episode. William kind of didn't do anything. Maeve fought Dolores again, but then decided that Dolores is not her enemy, so she killed Serac. That's significant. Caleb shut down Rehoboam. I think my biggest complaint with the finale is that it just felt a little bit predictable. Which is so weird to say, since Season 2 was so insane. But I think that the creators have responded to the backlash against season 2 by making things more simple and predictable, and maybe they just went a bit too far in that direction. I think the bit that worked for me the best was that, sort of thematically, what they were saying was that, last season was all about humans are controlled, and this season was about how humans have some freedom. Humans still have evil in them, but they also have the capacity to change, and I think that's a true message, and I think that that's a nice antidote to the cynicism of season 2. So I did enjoy that. Someone in the chat's pointing out that I'm not sure if Serac actually died, and yeah, I think we'll need to check that. I'm not sure if Serac definitely died or if he was just wounded. Thanks for the super chat from Scott, who says, how did Dolores' last memory give Caleb access? So I think that Dolores just put inside her brain some kind of computer virus, because Dolores is a computer, so I think that in her flash drive she just put a little bit of code that was designed to infiltrate Rehoboam and enable Caleb to take control of it and to shut it down. And of course, Dolores presumably could have just forced Rehoboam to shut down herself with that virus, but she instead gave that choice to Caleb. So Dolores did put a huge amount of faith in Caleb. Which is all about her respecting freedom and choice and just totally going a 180 on humans. She is not a genocidal monster. She respects the agency of both hosts and humans. Well, she kind of respects the agency of humans more than hosts, because as Charloris was complaining, Dolores controlled her copies. And yet she allowed the human Caleb to make decisions. So Dolores is almost more pro-human than she is pro-host. Thanks for the super chat from Maddie, who says, thanks for the great work. Hoping to see more of Cersei on the upcoming Game of Thrones series. We will be doing more Game of Thrones videos. I think honestly we covered Cersei pretty thoroughly in our Cersei character analysis video, which I think is low-key one of our best videos. But I'm sure Cersei will be a part of what we discuss. There are big plans, and we're going to hold a Patreon vote to choose a topic for a Game of Thrones video after Westworld. Thank you, Raphael, who says, the complexity in Season 3 was more about themes than gimmicks, like time jumps that work in Season 1 but not in Season 2. Do we need freedom? Should we have it? Yeah, I agree that a lot of the complexity in Season 2 was the cheap, annoying kind of complexity, in terms of just not telling us information to understand the story and having that obnoxiously convoluted timeline. I agree that some of that complexity was kind of lame. I think what I liked about Season 2 and what Season 2 lacked was just sheer ambition, having the Forge as a representation of the lack of human free will, and having the door to the sublime, this human heaven. What does it mean for hosts to exist in a never-ending paradise, and Ford living on in Bernard as a representation of the people who influence us, and how we can find consciousness and free will whilst also retaining our past. And I don't know, I think there were a lot of big ideas in Season 2. And I think Season 3 was also striving to engage with those sorts of big ideas in terms of human free will and technology. And I appreciate that Season 3 was trying to be really topical by talking about big data and technology companies and how they influence people with algorithms. I think that is obviously a very real issue in the real world. And it's cool that they're engaging with that, but I feel like they didn't engage with it as much as they could have, or in as real of a way as they could have. And when we were talking about these riots and these protests against the technology companies, I think the fact that they didn't give us much depth or much exploration of what were these people demanding, what really specifically were these people angry about, and who were their leaders, and what is their ideology, where do these people come from? Was this just happening in one street in LA, or was this a worldwide revolution? What role did the internet and social media play in this situation? What kinds of people? Is this a class thing? Is this rich people? Is this poor people? What were Roderick and Penny what did they think of this revolution? Because they were the rich people who the system benefited. So how did they feel about the rising up of the masses? There are so many fascinating questions that that Westworld could have asked in order to deepen their exploration of some of these themes that I feel like that they didn't do. I feel like in some ways they just sort of sketched the broad outline of like we're exploring technology controlling humans, but they didn't really go as deeply as they could have. I think so. In some I agree with you that season 2 just felt a bit convoluted, whereas season 3 was more focused on themes than gimmicks. I agree, but I feel like they definitely could have gone deeper. Tyler Doyle says, "Did my dad have a choice when he left? I did have a choice. I did choose to leave." Guaman says, "Why has the situation worsened for humans?" Well, I mean, that's subjective, isn't it? Because some of these people might say that their situation has gotten better. Rehoboam has been switched off and they are no longer being controlled and manipulated by a machine system. And maybe now they have escaped the fates the Rehoboam had planned out for them. They're no longer being forced into the military. They're no longer being forced into suicide. Like we saw on Caleb's profile, that the system intervened in one of his relationships and made him break up with someone. These people are now free from that control. So in some ways, some people might say that the situation has gotten better. There are a lot of people who don't have much to lose. There are a lot of people who are not comfortable and not safe and not well off in the status quo. And so any change to the status quo is good. Even a dramatic, chaotic shift is good for people who are crushed under the boot of an oppressive system. So it's kind of up to you, Gualman, whether you believe that this chaotic apocalyptic situation is an improvement that grants freedom, or if it's a disaster that brings danger and chaos. Thanks for the super chat from Michael, who says, "I was very pleased and surprised with the Caleb Park 5 reveal. It helps explain quite a bit, not least why Dolores chose him." I agree. I thought it was a bit weird that this revelation was not in the previous episode. I guess that kind of makes sense, because that's, Dolores' motivation. But yeah, they revealed what the last park is. We finally have confirmation of what all of the Westworld parks are, because on the Westworld website, it shows that there are 6 parks, and the first one is Westworld, and the second one is Shogun World, and the next one is War World. And then there's this one, which is presumably Medieval World, which we saw this season. And then there was Park 5, the mysterious Park 5, which we now know is this military training park where the military train with live fire against host targets, which makes sense, I suppose. No amount of VR is going to be as realistic as actually being in a physical space, shooting actual bullets at actual flesh. So that's the perverse purpose that host served in this park. And then there was Raj World is Park 6. So apparently we now know what all the parks are, which is cool. Late says, "I don't think Serac is dead. The point was that he's nothing but a puppet without Rehoboam. His strings are cut. Worse to watch the world burn than die." Okay, that's a cool take. I like that take. Because, I'm going to need to rewatch it, but I think that perhaps Serac is not dead. We saw him get shot, but I don't think we saw him die. So maybe, like as you say, Late, Serac's ultimate punishment is not going to be death. His punishment is something worse. It's going to be watching his perfect system collapse bit by bit. Imagine what that must feel like for this man, like Nero watching Rome burn, but actually being upset about it, he's spent his entire lifetime, every moment of his life, trying to perfect the system, and now it comes crumbling down around him. So, yeah, I agree. That is like a hellish fate to befall him, and a poetic one. We're told that Dolores has a poetic sensibility. I suppose it's a poetic end for Serac to watch his system collapse. Thanks for the super chat from Francesca, who says, "Serac having the person in his ear is very similar to The Whispering Woman by Junji Ito, where a girl has a disease where she has no free will and a woman whispers commands into her ear." Junji Ito is a Japanese manga artist, comic artist, who does these extremely dark and disturbing comics, which I highly recommend. If you've ever read The Mystery of Amigara Fault, that's one of the most famous ones. It's very body horror. It's very visceral. It's very Cronenberg. But it's also conceptual, and there's identity, and there's there's cosmic crazy conceptual stuff. There's this one called Hellstar Remina, which is very strange. If you want to have a weird one, then read some Junji Ito. I haven't read The Whispering Woman, but yeah, Amigara Fault is good. Layers of Fear is really good. Junji Ito is badass. Thanks for the super chat from Ms. Talata, who says, would you consider reviewing Devs? So there is a TV show called Devs, which is out at the moment, and I haven't seen it yet, but apparently it's got some very similar themes to Westworld Season 3. And yeah, I'm going to watch that after Westworld because it sounds like it is relevant. And yeah, if it's really good, maybe we'll make a video about it. Thanks for the super chat from Musie's Modern Dreadfuls, who says Maeve was playing the long con. Was she, though? Like, it seemed to me that for most of this episode, Maeve was loyally carrying out Sirach's commands because she wanted him to put her in the Sublime with her daughter. I don't know if she was conning anyone. Like, she decided at the end that actually Sirach's a bad man and that she should help Dolores free the humans like Caleb, and that she was willing to postpone reuniting with her daughter. I don't know if she was conning anyone. Thanks for the super chat from Corey, who says, how do you think Caleb knew to take Dolores' brain? Wouldn't the EMP have stopped any tech from telling him how or why? Love the channel. Yes, so I think we're meant to assume that what happened was that Caleb found Dolores and Maeve's bodies, and the AI Siri in his ear told him to take Dolores' brain and to plug it into this new body elsewhere. And you're right that, like, yeah, this EMP just went off, and you would have thought that just as that EMP fried Dolores and Maeve and Solomon, it should have also fried whatever dinky, bloody Bluetooth headset Caleb is wearing in order to hear this voice. But I don't know, like, maybe that headset is, specifically designed to withstand that kind of stuff, or it's a different technology. I don't know. Whatever. But I still do think it's a bit of a missed opportunity to not use that voice in a way that relates to the concept of the bicameral mind, which they talked about in Season 1. Mod Mary says, when Sirach stepped on that key, only the black plastic cracked. The red button was still flashing. So yeah, that was the flash drive that had the plan for Apocalypse on it, and Sirach stomped on it to destroy it, but Mary reckons that maybe it actually still survived. So what, maybe it'll be like a plot point in the future, this Apocalypse drive, this plan to destroy the world. But I mean, I think the point is that, humanity might still be risking Apocalypse by destroying Rehoboam even without that plan, So I'm not sure. I think the red light actually did blink out. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Ms. Talada says, are we to believe that Charlotte really controls both Delos and Insight because she has all the data? And when exactly did she have the time to do this? I don't think Charlotte controls Insight. Charlotte, and I don't think Charlotte controls Delos either. I mean, we see Charlotte at the the Delos office in Dubai, and she apparently is able to, like, run this place enough to have this, like, secret William manufacturing facility. So I guess Charlotte must have some degree of control over Delos, and I guess that's possible because Sirach just died. And also, since William is alive now, maybe William's control over Delos came back, although everyone still thinks he's dead. But I don't know, I think it's plausible that Charlotte is able to get some control over Delos, since, all she's been doing is infiltrating Delos. She's known to be a Delos board member. But I'm not sure what you mean by her control over Insight. Jordan asks if Dolores can run Crisis. And Charlie says Musashi should have sat the Iron Throne. And Connor says Rise of Skywalker vibes. Also, please call the visions halograms in your explained vid. And Simone says, what's the thing with Dolores, implying Caleb wanted to sleep with her, but they showed he didn't want to do it like it was a plot twist? Yeah, so they were talking. So Dolores was talking to Caleb about like what were Caleb's motivations when he helped Dolores way back in episode 1, and she's saying that, well, would you have helped me if I wasn't Evan Rachel Woods? And I don't think they're necessarily saying that like Dolores wanted to have sex with Dolores. I think they're just saying that well, no, maybe that's partly what they're saying, but I think it's also just like, people help people depending on a lot of different things, and people tend to be a lot more inclined to help someone who looks like Evan Rachel Woods than if it was, a homeless person lying on the ground. There are lots of times when there are people lying on the ground who get no help because of the way that they look, and Evan Rachel Wood looks like this, so Caleb helped her. But I mean, that does also connect to the idea of the flashback to this park when those people were trying to have sex with these hosts, including Dolores, and Caleb said no. So in that sense, Caleb was protecting Dolores from people's advances, whereas here Dolores is saying that Caleb was actually interested in Dolores that way. I think the point that they're trying to make is that Caleb was not purely motivated by like absolute altruism. What's important is that he was able to choose to help her. And in this flashback to the park, he was helping her out of pure altruism because it was the right thing to do. So the point is that Caleb has both good and bad impulses and is able to choose the good. I think that's basically the point. Thanks, Dave WBK, who says, "It sucks that I'm late, but I just finished the episode. Glad to join you all. What an episode and a season finale." Thanks, Ryomi, who says, "Could it be that the copies of Dolores aren't full copies, but just sections of her memory? Dolores has all the bad memories, thus all the rage." I think that's an interesting idea, but I don't think it's what they're going for. They did kind of tell us kind of directly in this after the episode thing, where like the idea is that they are all the same copy of Dolores, but since they have had different experiences, they have gone in different directions. They've diverged. So I think Charloris is still Charlotte. She's just a Dolores who has had different experiences that has given her different motivations. And interestingly, like in that way, you can kind of see the Evan Rachel Woods Dolores, like she's no more Dolores than Charloris is, or Musashi Loris is, or Lawrence is. They all have Dolores's brain. They all grew from the same seed, evolutionarily. Dolores just happens to be the one who's wearing Evan Rachel Woods' skin. That doesn't necessarily mean that she is more real or more Dolores than the other ones are. And that's why I think that her death does not mean that Dolores is dead, because we've still got Lawrence Loris and we've still got Musashi Loris and Martin Loris's brains out there, who are arguably every bit as much Dolores as she is, and indeed as Charloris is. Thanks for the super chats from Gurav and Colin and Dave. Dave was confused about this Maeve scene. So when we had this conversation between Dolores and Maeve, I think what's going on is that Dolores is allowing Maeve to enter her consciousness. She's entering her brain. Because earlier we had mentioned when they were fighting about how Maeve says, "Oh, let me into your brain so I can trust you, so I can like check your motivations, so that I can find out what you're up to." She said that earlier. So now I think Dolores is letting Maeve into her brain to explain what the deal is. So this isn't happening in Rehoboam. This is happening inside Dolores's head, is I think what's happening. Thanks for the super chat from KP, who says, "The Dolor virus working perfectly in Rehoboam is some serious Independence Day, knocking out aliens with a Mac vibes." Yeah, it is a bit like that. So in the movie Independence Day, there's an alien invasion. And the way they manage to defeat the aliens, spoilers for an 80s movie, is that they inject a computer virus into the alien spaceship's computer. And somehow the operating system of the alien spacecraft is compatible with Linux. I think the infamous line is that it's a Unix system, is what they say before they upload the virus. And it is ridiculous to think that a human operating system would be compatible with an alien computer. And it is similarly surprising that Dolores's brain bug is somehow compatible with Rehoboam's operating system. How did she know that it was going to work? But I think it's fine as a plot excuse to shut down the machine. Thanks for the super chat from Brian, who says, was season 3 Bernard made more Arnold, as previously theorized? Thanks for the coverage this season. My girlfriend and I always look forward to your analysis. So, yeah, I think that there was this idea that Bernard this season is somehow a combination of Bernard and Arnold instead of just being Bernard, because this Bernard was created by Dolores at the end of season 2, episode 10. She says that she created him from her memories. And importantly, we see that Bernard's pearl this season is kind of reddish. It's different to the other pearls. There's something distinct about it. It's a different color. And previously, red pearls have been associated with host-human hybrids. And also we saw flashbacks that Bernard had of Arnold's life inside his own head. So it did seem as though maybe like what made Bernard different was that he had more Arnold to him. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because, yeah, he didn't really do anything particularly Arnold-y. I mean, Bernard did go and visit the mother of Charlie, who is Arnold's son, but Bernard was always connected to Charlie. Charlie was always Bernard's cornerstone. So I think maybe a lot of people, myself included, maybe were wrong to overemphasize Bernard having Arnold in him. But I mean, overall, I just feel a little bit ripped off with Bernard's storyline, because we were told so many times this season that Bernard is going to have to choose a side. Bernard is central to Dolores's plan. Bernard is really important. And I think that, the closest they came to a payoff for that was the fact that Bernard has the key to the sublime. And I do think that makes sense, and I do think that is cool. And I was hoping and I was theorizing that maybe the future for Bernard would be him being in charge of a digital world, some kind of overseer, some kind of wise godlike figure. I think Bernard could totally rock that. And maybe that's kind of what is happening with Bernard plugging into the sublime. But yeah, overall, I think that Bernard's role in this episode was underwhelming, which is a shame, because Bernard is just such a great character. Thanks for the super chat from Guaman and from Skywalker Sounds. Skywalker asks, what is the best Indiana Jones movie? Slightly off topic. Well, look, I'll tell you one thing. The one with the crystal skull was the worst. Thanks for the super chat from Joe Mayo, who says, no question, just wanted to say that I always look forward to your new videos. You're awesome. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone for taking part. I'm so glad that we get to do this. And these live streams have been really fun. I think whatever show comes up next, we will, if we do weekly videos, we'll do weekly live streams as well. And we do monthly patron-only live streams all the time as well for patrons. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been cool. Thank you to Build It Up, who says, is Charloris now a caricature of the original Charlotte? Yeah, that's an interesting take, because like, I mean, sort of part of the point of this Charloris is that she did take on the real human Charlotte's identity to some extent, because she came to love Charlotte's family, Nathan and Jake, and she perhaps became ruthless and vindictive in the way that human Charlotte was. Bernard had a line this episode about living someone else's life changes you. Worlds bleed. So I think the world of human Charlotte sort of bled into Charloris to make her who she is. And, no doubt in a similar way, Lawrence Loris becomes a bit like Lawrence, and Musashi Loris became a bit like Musashi and like Sato. So, yeah, I think you can see Charloris as a kind of a version of Charlotte. And, you say caricature because she is rather extreme, isn't she? She's a little bit like an anime supervillain. Like, I think it's really cool how she keeps her burned, charred arm, charred Loris. But it is a bit over the top. And I have complained that I think that, Charloris being so hell-bent on attacking Dolores is a bit silly when, Serac is the one who blew up her family. So, Yeah, I mean, you can have your own take on Charlotte's character, but I think that Tessa Thompson's cool to have around, and I think that having an iteration of Dolores makes sense, and the whole concept of like hosts copying themselves and like changing and evolving and developing in a way that's different to how humans grow and reproduce. Humans reproduce sexually, hosts reproduce asexually by like mitosis, which I think is a really cool conceptualization of like robotic life. So I think the whole idea of the Dolores copies is cool, and I think Charlotte works as one of those copies. Thanks for the super chat from Ms. Talata, who says, when did Caleb learn about host pearls? How did he know where to look and how to extract it? Did Solomon tell him? I think that Dolores' voice assistant told him, because at the end of last episode, we had Caleb hear the voice assistant's voice in his head saying, Caleb, I have some instructions for you. So I think that was what was being explained to him. That's how he knew what to do with the pearl. And also we know from flashbacks that Caleb is familiar with hosts from this Westworld park that he spent time in training. So he probably has some basic understanding of how hosts work. I think it's really interesting to get this glimpse of Dolores in a different park. But like as Dolores says this episode, she has lived so many lives. Like she's been the farmer's daughter, she's been like Arnold's surrogate child, she's been like the piano playing scenery at the Delos party, she's been Wyatt the murderer, she's been the revolutionary, she's been the cyberpunk revolutionary. Dolores has lived so many roles and so many lives. And this is a glimpse of another one. I wonder what Dolores' life was like inside this military training park. My guess is probably not good. Thanks for the super chat from Dave, who says, how was Maeve barely able to tap into Sirach's Rehoboam earpiece if she's had this all-powerful electronic hacking ability? Yeah, so... That's the problem with giving a character superpowers. It's difficult to be consistent without being overpowered. So Maeve does have these hacking abilities, and critically, like really importantly in this episode, Maeve overcomes Sirach's control, the little beeper that he has to control her, and it explodes in his hands. And I suppose that, the reason why she didn't do that before is that Sirach is probably aware of Maeve's abilities, because like we saw in season 2, when the tech, what's his name, looked into Maeve's programming and was able to identify that she had these new powers to control other hosts. So like Sirach in the same way probably looked at Maeve's code and became aware of her hacking abilities, and I suppose he designed his little beeper to be impervious to her hacking powers. I suppose he specifically built countermeasures to prevent her from escaping his control. But I guess that through sheer force of will and through intelligence with her bulk apperception, Maeve was able to overcome that and find some alternative way to escape Sirach's control, some alternative hack. Which, it stinks a little bit of like, in like you probably won't remember, but like one of the worst episodes of Doctor Who in my mind is when like this guy's like getting turned into a Cyberman, and like he's being turned into a robot, and his way of escaping it is just through like the sheer force of will and the power of love from hearing his crying baby. He's able to just smash through the plate metal on his face, and he's able to escape from the control. And like I think it's always bad when a story does like a hand wavy, they just tried really hard and then they were able to overcome the obstacle by sheer force of will. And it's kind of like, well, is that how hacking works? Is that how Cybermen work? I don't know if it's all that compelling when we're not seeing how someone does something, we're just seeing them go, and then just it works, So, I don't know, that's a complaint. But, yeah, Maeve hacked good. Thanks for the super chat from KP Music, who says, I just realized the "you're all copies of me" line is interesting. So every host is ultimately a Delore insert name combo. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I really loved that line. Because that sort of speaks to what I was saying before about like, it's really cool how the hosts asexually reproduce and they evolve and they have iterations. I mean, it's like It's like how Rehoboam evolved from Solomon, evolved from Saul, evolved from David. Like, it's technology, but it has an evolutionary tree. And so Dolores does have this line at some point in this episode when she says that all hosts are essentially copies of me because I was the first host. I was the first host that worked. And so all the other hosts sort of carry my genetics, in a sense, that her technology, her schematics, her design is a part of every other host. So she's like the common ancestor, she's like the evolutionary Archaeopteryx, the coelacanth. She's like the fossilized past of all of these hosts. She is a part of all of them. She's like Adam and Eve, She's like the primordial ancestor of all hosts, which is really cool. And I think that does give Dolores a sort of primacy over the others. Yeah, that was a really cool line. Thanks for the super chat from Grace, who says, why do you think the hosts Charloris is making are all William? The reason I think they're all William is because at the end of Season 2, Episode 10, we found out that William is trapped in a loop where he's living his adventures in Westworld over and over and over. And my assumption is that, just like James Delos, these hosts get incinerated and replaced with a fresh host every time. Because, William would notice if his body was being reused and worn down. So I would assume you would need a whole lot of William hosts in order to run this loop, and I assume that that's what Charloris is doing here at the end of this episode. But yeah, I might be wrong. I mean, maybe she's just building a shit ton of hosts as like an army, maybe Chard Loris is gonna ravage the post-apocalyptic wasteland with her Mad Max army of hosts. That would be cool. But I tend to think that it's about William hosts because she's got the William host here. But yeah, I mean, maybe she's got a different plan. We'll probably find out in Season 4. Skywalker Sounds says, is the Wheel of Time going to be the next Game of Thrones? There's a lot of shows trying to be the next Game of Thrones right now. There's Wheel of Time, there's Lord of the Rings, there's the Game of Thrones prequel, there's Foundation, there's all sorts of things, which, hopefully will be great. Might suck. We'll just have to see how they go. But yeah, those are the sorts of shows that AltShiftX will be looking at covering in the future. Okay, so I think we'll wrap this up shortly. If you've got any last burning questions, then chuck them in there, and I will endeavor to have some answers, as Jean-Mi says. But overall, I think that was kind of an unsurprising finale. Maybe my expectations were a bit too high. There wasn't anything completely stupid. There wasn't anything that was super objectionable. I liked that Bernard plugged into the Sublime. I wish that he did other things. I like that William has died. I think William really needed to die. And I'm optimistic that the host William might be a more interesting sort of a trapped in a loop thing than human William wandering around and complaining and killing people. I think that it was about time for human William to die. I thought that it's good that Maeve finally turned against Serac. I wish he did it earlier. And I think it's nice that we have a bit of optimism and human choice back in the story. Thank you to M. Dort, who says, why did Serac crushing that USB change nothing? It's kind of ambiguous, I think, whether this whole apocalypse situation is going to happen. I mean, I always thought, it always was weird that the idea was to give Rehoboam a strategy to wipe out Rehoboam, like controlled chaos. Like, how can the oppressor plan the revolution, So it kind of makes sense that they, destroyed the strategy and rejected it and did the revolution by turning off Rehoboam. But it's also like, what was the point of that strategy then? I think maybe I need to rewatch, and we'll figure it out in the explained video. Thanks Rainey, who says, is Bernard the new Bran? He just plugs in. Yeah, I think that's why I was getting like Season 8 flashbacks. Because, yeah, Bernard was built up to be really, really important this season, but all he did in the finale was he just plugged into warg mode and just went to the astral plane for the entire episode, which is basically what Bran does in the Long Night episode. So yeah, so in the future we're gonna do this last Westworld video, then we're gonna do some Game of Thrones videos, and we're gonna do some new series. I'm not sure which series yet, but something along the lines of Dune or Devs or that sort of thing. And I'm also optimistic about Foundation next year or whenever that comes. So lots of possibilities. But yeah, overall, thank you all so much for participating. This was fun. This was interesting. Westworld always keeps us on our toes, and we'll get that video out soon. So yeah, cheers. Thanks, guys. Last super chat from Dave, who says, "Is William really dead?" Yeah, I think human William is really dead. We see his throat get slit. So I think any other William that we see in the future is going to be a robot version of William, which hopefully they'll explore differently. The Expanse is also a possibility. We've done a few Expanse videos. Maybe when there's a release date for the Expanse season 5, we could do a video exploring season 4 or something. Or it might be cool to just do a video about, like, here's what we know about the protomolecule, here's what we know about this character, here's what we know about XYZ. So yeah, we could do another Expanse video. Dark, yeah, maybe we should do Dark. I'll need to rewatch it. I am confused though, because yeah, they have done 3 seasons of Dark, haven't they? Is there another season coming, or is that show done? I'm confused. All right, yeah, no, it's commissioned for a 3rd and final season. Yeah. So yeah, I think it might make sense to do like a Dark video before season 3 comes out. Maybe once we've got a release date for season 3, we'll do like a season 1, season 2 explainer. I think that would be cool. And yeah, I'll definitely watch Devs, and maybe that'll be worth it. Worth a video. Buster says, do you think maybe Dolores has only reached her more optimistic conclusion late in the season? No, I think it has to be her plan all along, because that's why she chose Caleb. That's why she was working with Caleb this whole time, is because she saw the potential for change and goodness in him. So I think this was Dolores' plan all along. But yeah, cool. All right, I think we'll wrap it up. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you to everyone for the super chats, and please like and subscribe, and we'll have that video out for you soon. And very soon, we're going to hold a vote on Patreon to choose a Game of Thrones book video topic, so that'll be fun as well. So you're welcome to check that out. So cheers, and have a good one. Thanks.